is Costa Everdopoulos, CEO of Evercom, aware of many hats. So I'm a Swiss Army knife, but my passion has always been QA. I've spent most of my time, I started out as a developer, crossed over into QA through automation. So I spent many years doing lots of cool stuff with automation, with performance testing, functional automation, went into various leadership positions. I have, worked as a product owner. I've worked as a CTO at a startup. I've got a couple of inventions. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I'm not going to read through all of this. If you want to contact me, if you want to connect with me, there's my, can you see the QR code? Okay. So you can connect with me on LinkedIn. What else? Some of the companies I've worked for, just a few on the right-hand side there. And I am very involved. I'm just as passionate about getting involved in the community as I am about testing and AI. So, and that's a good segue into the next slide, which is a shameless plug for AQAA. So AQAA is Atlanta Quality Assurance Association. I have a board member that's with me in the back there, Steve. They've been around a really long time, okay? But that doesn't mean that we're old school or not fun. We can do some pretty fun and cool things. So come join us. You can find us on meetup.com. Just search for AQAA. It's basically, we have monthly user meetings. We have pretty cool speakers that come in. If you're interested in being a sponsor, I would love to have you as a sponsor. We've had Smart Bear, Tricentis, and companies like that have sponsored us. Maybe we get Cypress to sponsor us. But again, 1,700 members, all here in Georgia. That's it. So come find us. All right. So why are we here? Why am I up here? Why am I talking about this stuff? I should go sit down, right? Of course, nobody's been living under a rock, right? We know AI is exploding, right? It's all in since GPT kicked things, lit the fuse. So in the last 12 months, if you've kept up with the news, did everyone hear about what happened at Accenture? Anyone? Yeah, I see a couple nods. So basically they said 70,000 people, there's the door, because you are not AI compatible. You are not, right? So we're saying, the message is there, it's very clear. Get on the AI train or there's the door, right? So we're being forced to embrace this stuff. Amazon did the same thing. They let 60,000 people go because they were not AI compatible, right? So here we are. We're here to learn, right? And that's why we showed up today, right? So most organizations typically prefer to test their AI concepts as a pilot, right? That's what we've done historically, even before AI, right? What do we do when we want to experiment with something? We do a pilot on it, right? We measure we set some KPIs up, we evaluate what was lessons learned, all those kind of things. It's no different here. Well, MIT, I'm sure everyone is familiar with this study, right? This study was released in the fall, and as you can see, it says 95% of AI pilots are failing. That's a lot. That's a lot of money being wasted, right? Who saw this report and read it? Raise your hand. Nobody? One person? Two people? Okay. Good. Yeah, go read this report. It's a good one. That day when this report came out, I remember the day the report came out because the stock market tanked that day. Everyone was running for the door, saying, "Oh my gosh, the AI bubble is going to pop, right? There's no more investment, but everyone's going to because AI sucks." Basically, is what this report is saying, right? So all the investors are going to get gun shy, and there's no more money coming into AI. But obviously, that was a temporary blip. So, but the more important thing here is why. Why are they failing? And that's what we're going to talk about today. Okay. All right. Oops, wrong way. All right, so normally, just a quick caveat, I gave this talk as a keynote speaker at another conference, and I had 90 minutes, okay? I only have 30 minutes today, so little small caveat, I'm gonna go really fast through some of this stuff, but I am planning on doing maybe a live stream. I've had a lot of requests for people to do something, to do the deeper dive, to do the full 90-minute session. So if you connect with me, I'll announce that on LinkedIn or somewhere, and we'll do the deeper dive, okay? So keep that in mind. But Really quick, I want to find out why you all are here. Is there anything specific to what brought you here to this conference today, or in something specific that you're interested in hearing about this presentation? Raise your hand. Nobody? Who's doing Agentic project or working with agents now? Show of hands. 3, 4, 5 people? Okay. Oh, 6, 7? Okay, a few of you. Any challenges or anything that you're facing right now with agents you want to share? Or anything that's on your mind? No? What's that? All the time, okay. All right, well, for the essence of time, we'll keep going to give, because again, I'm going to fly through a lot of this. So, first we need to, obviously this is the conference here is Agentic Quality, but there's different definitions, right? So how do you define an agent? What about you over here? What do you define? Anybody, raise your hand. How do you define an agent? Okay, prompt and then loops until it's complete. All right. Who can expand on that a little more? Anybody? Yeah. A goal, a role, and a goal. Okay, I like it. Good. All right. Anybody else? Yes. Yes. So, how I define an agent is a system that can reason. That's the key word, reason. It can think on its own. If I want to summarize it, it's at the bottom here. It's like a digital employee, right? It's a worker. It can do things. And there's a key distinction here because, automation, and I'm not talking about test automation, I'm talking about task automation, right? Like RPA stuff. So there's a little bit of blurry, area there. And so I wanted to kind of point that out. So an example of automation is I schedule something, a job to run, right? I say, did all my tests run, which passed, which failed, and then give me a report afterwards. That's not AI, right? That's just automation. It's doing an if then else kind of rule-based trigger. Whereas an agent, if you would ask the agent, what happened today, right? And the agent would go and think, what are my data sources, right? You're not defining the data sources, it's figuring it out for you, right? It's doing the thinking. Hey, I need to go to this database, pull this report, I need to go over here, pull that report, and then assemble a dashboard. So that's the key difference here, okay? One of the other things that is interesting about agents is this idea of modes, right? So not many people talk about this, but you have supervised, which is where a human is essentially babysitting the agent, right? There's a push-pull, there's a prompt, right? And you check the work, and then you let it continue. Semi-supervised is where you're giving a little bit more. It's like a child, right? It goes, now it's a toddler. It's walking around, right? It's stumbling into things. You're still having to check. It's kind of like the human in the loop. This is where 90% of the work is today, under semi-supervised, right? And then unsupervised is where obviously that's full autonomous. We're not quite there yet, right? AI is not mature enough to take that on. Any questions? All right. So I'm not going to get too deep into this, but the 3 basic components of an agent are you have an LLM, obviously. You have memory so that it can retain across multiple sessions. You have to have some kind of memory component. And then various tools. So you have, gather the data, scan emails, search the web, scrape some data, pull a document, pull an image, take some action, right? Create a pull request, generate a report, whatever. And then you have orchestration. So orchestration is pulling in dozens, if not hundreds of agents to perform some kind of function. Or agents calling other agents, right? Sub-agents. That's what we mean by orchestration. And then MCP. Is everyone familiar with MCP? Some of you? So really quick, MCP is basically a translator. It's a plugin that allows AI system to talk to various apps. Okay, that's a very oversimplified explanation, but we're trying to go through this to make sure we cover everything quickly. So this is a quick snapshot of evolution of AI for software development. So When GPT came out shortly after, how were we using it? Developers were using it to say, here's my code, right? Copy and paste it in. Can you find some holes in it? Some bugs. Can you help me write my code? That was kind of stage one, right, with the training wheels. And then we moved into more, using Copilot, right? Integrated with our IDEs and with whether it's test automation or code development, right? That was kind of the next wave. And now we're into the agentic wave. So again, I'm flying through this a little quicker than I like to because I want to get through all the content. So this is the crux of the problem, okay? The problem with AI is that there's no shortage of things on our wish list, right? Of things that we want to do. We want to take user stories and write an agent that's going to convert user stories to test cases. All of these cool things, right? We have hundreds of things on our wish list, right? Do a lot of you have stuff on your wish list? Anybody? At least ideas or things you want to do? But the challenge is, how do I prioritize? How do I choose which project or what I want to do first, right? And that's essentially what evolved or what led to me creating the AI Feasibility Framework. So essentially, I did this for several Fortune 500 clients. The feedback was very great. They really liked it. We iterated. It's a work in progress. So this is not a static system. It is something that is perpetually being updated all the time, okay? There's a scoring system. We have some success criteria. We're going to get into the nuts and bolts of it here in the following slides. But essentially, it's a vetting process that we integrate into our development process for when prioritizing AI agent use cases, okay? So here's the end state. This is what it looks like when you're done with all the sausage making, okay? You're left with a list, like this is a sample backlog where you have, okay, the use case, the first one there is generating use cases. And the benefit is, we want a 20% productivity boost. That's our goal. And so we went through the scorecard process, and this one got a 60. All the others, I'm not going to read through all of these, but the idea here is, and there's a lot of effort to get to this point. We're talking 3 to 5 to 6 different sessions, probably about 20 to 30 hours worth of time to get to this point. So it's not something where you just sit down for an hour and you knock it out. Right? It's a little involved. Has everyone here, I assume, has participated in backlog grooming? Backlog grooming, right? Yeah. So it's kind of like that. It's very similar to backlog grooming. So you're going in and you can go back and revisit some of these use cases because sometimes the requirements change, right? No, really? No, they stay the same all the time, right? No. But the key here is the higher the score, that means that use case is more feasible for you to do first. So in this case, this particular client, this is an actual client that I did, won't mention the name, but in this case, user stories bubbled up to the top. So that was the first use case we should do. Now, does this mean, the model is flexible, so it's very open to adding additional criteria. In general, it's very flexible. And also, that doesn't mean just because the model says, go with, user stories first, the CEO can come in and say, yeah, I think we're gonna go with number 2. The main difference is you need to have buy-in, right? There's buy-in from the stakeholders and awareness, right? So we're all making this decision together. It's not just, somebody's pet project. And actually, that's how this concept was born. One of my Fortune 500 clients, they were literally fighting for 6 weeks over which use case to do. They had over 100 use cases of things they wanted to enable with AI, and they couldn't decide. They had narrowed it down to about 10, but they only had budget to do 2. So they said, Costa, help us here. We need to get to these 2, but nobody can agree. The CEO has his pet project. The director of technology has his pet project. Everyone was trying to sales pitch. Like, no, we should do this one first. This one has more value. If I boil this framework down, the idea is we're just trying to make this data-driven, right? Abstract all of the emotion out of this and make this as objective and data-driven as possible, right? And that's what this scorecard system does. So it doesn't, there's no bias and there's no pet projects anymore. All right? So, this goes into going back to that MIT study that we talked about. So I dug into what were the top reasons. Why are these 95%, that's a very high number, why are all of these failing? So the number one reason was flawed enterprise integration. What does that mean? It means the wrong tools or there was poor alignment with the business process, okay? And again, I can expand a lot more on these, but I want to, in the essence of time, keep this moving along. So, wrong use cases. That was the number two reason. That's exactly what our framework does, is it addresses picking the right use case. So it's funny, this study came out a year after I created the feasibility framework, and I'm like, yeah, that's a good thing to have. So, so again, picking the wrong use case can be very, very bad. So ineffective buy versus build, that's basically trying to build your own, do-it-yourself AI system. MIT said if you try to do, like if you're not using commercial off-the-shelf tools, you are trying to build your own LLM, for example, and your own AI tools or your own AI wrappers, right? Even a wrapper, as innocent as that is, they said you are 2 times more likely to fail. Twice as likely to fail. MIT said this, not me. So that was the number 3 reason. And then disconnected decision-making, that was more about top-down decision-making. So a lot of the CEOs and executives were saying, yeah, we should do this, and not consulting with their frontline managers or the people that had their hands on technology. So that was the disconnect there. Measurement accountability. These were, this is an interesting one. So this is where failures go unreported, no transparency. So we'll say, oh yeah, that project didn't go too well. Let's sweep that under the rug. Nobody will notice, right? Or we'll just erase that, and there'll be no trace that failure even happened. And this also falls in the bucket of not doing retrospectives, right? Huge fan of retrospectives. So a lot of people just not doing them. So this was another reason. The key here is to sum all of this up, because it's very important. Why do we need this framework? It's very important to understand these challenges and these problems. This is why, what you see here in front of you. But if you'll notice, a lot of these are not technology limitations, right? It's about having the right strategy in place. So that's what's missing here. We'll move on. So there's a specific life cycle with agents. I'm not going to go through all of these for the essence of time. But essentially, where the feasibility framework comes in is in that second circle with analyze and score. So from there, we go into planning, we go into designing the agent, and then we go off to constructing it. Some people, they just go right to construction, right? I know what the problem is. We're just going to go right in and start building. No design, no planning. So that's all I'm going to cover there. All right, so the cool thing about the framework is that if you're already doing Agile, and I hope all of you are, is that this dovetails really nicely into your Agile process, right? It dovetails into if you're doing backlog grooming, if you're doing sprint planning, it fits right in there, right? It integrates with that process quite easily. So, again, I don't have time to read through all of these, but that's the basic point I wanted to make. Okay? Any questions on this? So one question I had before was around the second bullet, baseline metrics. That's, okay, how long does it take you to convert user stories to tests manually today? That's what we mean by baseline. So that when we do it with an agent, we measure that process and see what our improvement is, okay? All right, so there's a few prerequisites before we can begin the framework process. We need to have these components in place. So there needs to be ownership, first of all. You need to have like a steering committee or an AI committee. Some of you probably, who has an AI committee in their company? Some of you, okay. If you don't, you will soon. You can create one, right? And if you're a small company, a really small business, there might only be 2 or 3 of you. Generally, it's like 8 to 12 people from various business units. You want to have, a good cross-section of leaders. So again, you start with that steering because you want to make sure this thing is not going to stall out on you, okay? You don't want to run out of funding. You want to have that top-down support to be able to continue, all right? And then you want to include governance, right? It's important that if you have governance in your company, you want to include those folks because this is going to become part of that process. You don't want to run into any roadblocks, get halfway through your project and go, oh, can't do that because governance is not going to allow it, right? And the good news is, the framework easily integrates with anything. Okay, so you want to have at least a project plan. It doesn't need to be a detailed plan, but some kind of, okay, we're going to do a pilot for the next 6 months, and then we'll go deeper after that with something else, right? And then you begin your pilot, and then you start taking all of those wish lists things and dumping them into a backlog if you don't already have one, okay? So that's where the framework picks up, is you already have all this stuff, you have a committee in place, and you have a backlog, and then we dive in. So this is the meat and potatoes, okay? So 11 criteria here, and when we started with this, it was only a handful of criteria. So as I said, this thing is an evolving work in progress. These criteria are what drive the scorecard. So the first one is called root cause alignment, and what we mean by that is how well do we understand what the real root cause of the problem is? So many times, I see clients, I see people, diving into, because we're engineers, right? We like to fix things with complex solutions. But, a lot of times we don't ask the question why, and that's my favorite word. You ever play the game 20 Questions? Familiar with that? So yeah, so that's what it's about. So you keep asking why. So a classic example of a failure of this is we say, oh, well, there's too many, our customers are reporting too many bugs in production. Okay, well, the QA must be dropping the ball. Let's automate more tests, right? That's our first inclination, is we want to engineer something. Oh, okay, that must be the problem. We're quick to make assumptions. Not me. I'm asking why, right? So that's what we mean by root cause alignment, is if you're doing the first and you're just jumping right in, your alignment is very low. You're going to get a 0 for that use case, right? Because it's not well understood. You really don't know what the root cause is. But if you say why, there's all these bugs in production, and somebody says, well, QA had their time crunch because developers needed more time, so QA got the short end of the stick. So who's never heard that story before, right? So we didn't have time, okay? And then you say, why? Okay, well, somebody made the decision because this. Why? Oh, because, there were some last minute changes in the requirements, and why? Right? You keep going down that path. When you can't ask any more whys, that's when you know you have the true root cause. So we don't always go that far with it, and that's a huge problem I see very common. Fortune 500 startups, small companies, everybody's failing miserably in this category. So if you're well understood, you get a 10. If you're no understanding, you get a 0. Somewhere in between, you get a 5. Okay? So that's how the scorecard system works. Again, the higher the score, the more feasible your use case will be in the backlog. Solution complexity, so pretty straightforward. It's, in general, how many things is it going to take to create this agent? What does the entire architecture of the solution look like? Okay. How are we on time? Good. Okay. Oops. Yeah, I'm going to run out of time. That's okay. All right. So let's see, what else can we talk about here? Systems impacted, that's pretty straightforward, right? How many systems? Now, this is a very I will give you a caveat. This is a very oversimplified scorecard, okay? I've had this, a lot of people, when I did a deeper dive on this, they ask, how do you come up, how do you define high? Well, each of these criteria has dozens of sub-criteria. So this thing is pretty complex. You're seeing the high level view here. But this is why it takes multiple, again, 3 to 5 meetings just to do one use case. It takes a lot to go through it, but it's worth it, right? How much does it, the alternative to not doing this is millions of dollars being wasted, and you end up in the 95%, right? I'm over here in the 5% group, in the framework. So, and I've done this I've done large-scale AI implementations for several Fortune 500 companies, and I've used this and it works. So, yeah, I don't have much time to go through the rest of this. Any questions on this? Anything that jump up at you? Because some of these are straightforward. Obviously, number of agent integrations. The more integrations you have, the more risk you're going to introduce, right? So you're going to get a lower score. Implementation rates. What could possibly break if we deploy this agent? What could it break? Could it break a production system? Could we have some data integrity issues? Again, these take time to think about and talk through, and it also makes you think, boy, we really need to think about who we have on that AI committee, right? You can't just have a few people. You need to have good representation to be able to answer these questions. You need to have some architects, right? So you need to have some business leaders, good cross-section when you're reviewing these things. And then obviously at the bottom, we have an expected productivity boost and ROI. And there's some ROI calculators that we use and all kinds of good stuff. Again, this is oversimplified. It's just to give you the concept of the scorecard. Let's see. Yeah. And then the last component is we have a weighting system. So weight, because not every criteria has equal weight, right? Some root cause alignment is very important, so that one has a 100% weight. Solution complexity, not so much. But again, this is flexible, so each client can define different weights. And I do this, I sit down, and we go, why do you think it should be higher or lower than the default? And then we make those changes, right? So there's some governance, there's some standards, but there's also a component that allows flexibility. So again, I'm sorry we didn't have time to really get into some of these use cases, but this was like converting user stories to a test case. So you can this is an actual scorecard I did with a client. And they really liked it a lot. They came back for more. This is a use case that we did for just automating tests. You can see like what each of the scores were. And again, if we had more time, we could go in to these. And again, this is the example we showed earlier with the end result. And then this is a continuous improvement process. So we don't just do the scores and that's it, we're done. We self-evaluate the framework itself, right? How well, I'll show you, this is the key here. So we have some KPIs. How well did the framework do? How well did we score? How close did we come? Kind of like when you do during your retrospectives and at the end of a sprint. How well did we estimate those story points? Were we above or below, right? It's kind of like that. That makes sense? So in summary, it's a data-driven process. It dovetails very nicely into your existing Agile processes. This can obviously be used not just for quality engineering, but also for development, for BAs, across your entire SDLC.